how to not give a fuck when you're investing in this
Monetization out of the out the
is
window.
out the window. We're going to be looking at a video from Mark Manson, the author of best-selling book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I recently came across a summary video that he did, and a lot of what he was saying in the summary of this book I felt related to investing. Before we get to the video, guys, hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell to be notified when videos like this go live. Join our free Discord and consider supporting us on Patreon.
Just pay the fucking $5.
Give us the goddamn money.
Dozens of people have posted summaries of my book. Well, fuck you. If there's going to be a summary of the book, it should come from the master non-fuck-giver himself. Moi. Don't try. Charles Bukowski. He was a very famous fiction and poetry writer, but he was a total drunk. He was a lowlife. He was in and out of prison. He had drug problems. He had prostitute problems. He is kind of a counter argument to most of the examples that you see in books like this. You can actually become conventionally successful in life despite yourself, while seemingly doing all of the wrong things. Now, the big idea to take away from chapter 1 is something called the backwards law. The pursuit of positive experience is itself a negative experience, and the acceptance of a negative experience is itself a positive experience. The idea is that the more that you pursue feeling better all the time, the less satisfied you become, as pursuing something only reinforces the fact that you lack it in the first place. The more desperately you want to be rich, the more poor and unworthy you will feel, regardless of how much money you have. Negativity is actually the path to positivity. Most people's assumption is they just want the positive experiences from life, but it's actually the tolerance and acceptance of the negative experience that leads to the positive experience. So I go on to finish chapter 1 by introducing the give a fuck framework. 3 subtleties of not giving a fuck. So subtlety number 1 is not giving a fuck does not mean being indifferent. It means being comfortable with being different. If you give a fuck about a few very important things, then the small things cease to bother you so much. Subtlety number 2 is to not give a fuck about adversity, you must first give a fuck about something more important than adversity. If you're always worried about how much money you have, the problem is not how much money you have, the problem is that you don't have anything better to worry about. Subtlety number 3, whether you realize it or not, you are always choosing what to give a fuck about. This concept of choosing will come back in force in chapter 5. Pretty much the entire chapter is about it.
I don't think I like this fucking guy.
You don't give a fuck about this guy?
I don't give a fuck about that. He starts off with Bukowski, how Bukowski failed up, I guess. So Bukowski gave a fuck. I think already his premise, honestly, is already shot to me, because anyone who fails up did something.
To be clear, what he's saying is that some people can be successful despite themselves. So whether he cared about it or not was a non-factor. He was going to be successful because he was talented, or he was good at something, or what he did had value.
Once again, I don't know Bukowski well enough, but I bet you
He sounds like a fun guy to party with.
So my point is, he gave a negative that he's a drunk, but honestly, lots of creatives who are very productive are drunks. Okay, I know a lot of them.
Yeah, there was the 3 subtleties as it applies to the backwards law. The idea that accepting the negative is what leads to the positive. Not expecting things to be positive all the time. That understanding that the path to the positive is through the negative. This is what we say a lot in a roundabout way by saying that bear markets are actually where people get rich, because you're investing when everyone else is running out the door. And when all those people come back, you benefit from the gains.
You could make a lot of money in a bull market, which we were privileged to have made.
Yeah.
But we bought some of these stocks in a bear market, which was short-lived, but it was 2020 bear market when everything tanked.
Yeah.
That's when I started going into Enphase and started going heavier into Tesla. And before that, but still, it was during that time. So when people had no faith in something. So I do see what you're saying there, but it sounds like he gives a lot of fucks.
A lot of what he's saying there is like, you can't not give a fuck about something. And so, yes, if you pick and choose what you give a fuck about versus trying to say please everyone, which is saying to try to be in everything, right? If you just want to buy every stock to sort of limit your risk, you're also not going to make any money because you're not investing enough in any specific industry or any specific stock. So I think in terms of that, like narrowing and focusing your lens of giving a fuck on a few specific things, like we have focused on, or at least me, I'll speak for myself, focusing on sustainable energy, EVs, right? And say cryptocurrency. Those are things that I am heavily focused on. And I give a lot of fucks about that. Some of the other stuff, that might be opportunities to me is just noise because I've decided that this is what I care about.
Happiness is a problem. So chapter 2 opens up with the story of the Buddha and focuses on the central Buddhist doctrine of dukkha, or the fact that life is suffering. That no matter what you do, where you go, there is some facet of suffering associated with it, simply because our mind becomes attached to things and attachment leads to suffering. Like if you think about evolution over the course of hundreds of thousands of years, a creature that is happy all the time, that creature is not going to survive. It's actually the creature that is a little bit dissatisfied all the time, a little bit anxious all the time, a little bit paranoid, a little bit pissed off. Like that's the creature that's going to do the most work to actually survive and replicate. This modern idea that we shouldn't have to feel bad ever is completely misguided. Negative emotions have an inherent purpose to them, and they help us. A lot of the anxiety that we wish to escape from, or the anger we wish to overcome, these emotions are actually signals within our body to do something. And if we ignore them, or if we train ourselves to ignore them, then we are actually limiting ourselves in a lot of ways. The hedonic treadmill, this idea that if I get a boat, I'll be happy, and then you get the boat and it's like you've got to pay docking fees. You're like, man, if I could just find a better dock, I'd be happy. And then you find a better dock. Then you realize that none of your friends want to drive out to that new dock. You're like, man, if I could just have some friends to hang out on my boat, then I'd be happy. And then you get friends on your boat, but then they get too drunk and they fall overboard. And it's like, happiness is, it's like this carrot always dangling in front of you, no matter what you do. Negative emotions have a lot of utility. They have a lot of purpose. They help us. They grant us meaning in a lot of situations, and they signal to us that we have challenges or problems that must be overcome. Happiness comes from solving problems. So kind of the secret sauce is finding problems that you kind of want to have or kind of enjoy having. And that's how I wrap up the chapter with a section called Choose Your Struggle. So if I ask you, what do you want out of your life? And you say something like, I want to be happy and have a great family and a job I like, your response is so common and expected that it doesn't mean anything. Everybody enjoys what feels good. Everybody wants to live a carefree, happy, and easy life. To fall in love and have amazing sex and relationships. To look perfect and make lots of money and be popular and well respected and admired. Everybody wants that. It's easy to want that. A more interesting question, a question that most people never consider, is what pain do I want in my life? What am I willing to struggle for? Because that actually seems to be a greater determinant of how our lives turn out.
Okay, so he starts it off with emotions shouldn't always be positive, that it's okay to have negative emotions.
Emotions are a place that help you sort of define the boundaries of what you're willing to accept, and they force you to take action.
I guess I could more or less agree with him there that no one's happy in a bear market, first of all. Like, even if you know you want to DCA into something, right? Like, I know I want more end-phase, but do I want to see end-phase at $100? I don't know if I really want to see that.
Isn't that the great like dichotomy? It's something that I see even on our Discord and across Twitter right now. The same people that are saying buy Tesla stock because we need to DCA because it's going to the moon, they're equally as upset about just the current value of their portfolio being down. In order for you to get that price, the value of your portfolio currently needs to be down.
You can't be a millionaire if something sort of catastrophic in the stock market doesn't happen. Like, you need it to happen,
Right.
assuming you had money on the side to actually
Right.
At least I learned over this past year, and I took a lot of whatever gains I was going to take and whatever I was going to sell, I sold it early. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
When I saw the crypto market starting to collapse, I didn't wait. I just said, forget it. I'm not holding all these altcoins. Because the first time I was in that mess 4 or 5 years ago at this point, I didn't do that. So it took that pain, a lot of pain. We have previous videos where I discussed 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, where I was in a great amount of pain in crypto because I went too heavy in 2017 and didn't sell at the peak, and held it and held it and held it, thinking that some magic would happen, it would return. I went through like all of this denial, this fear.
Yeah, there it is. Desperation, the panic.
I went through this, and then capitulation. My capitulation was not selling all my crypto, just saying it's worthless and moving on with my life. That was my capitulation. So I went through all this and I've learned a lot. So I think he's right about that point, that first of all, you need a lot of this negativity to come into your life in order to even learn. You can't learn if everything is positive. If everything's always going right, what education did you get? Now, and in this current bear environment, I'm actually not that upset. I'm in a different frame of mind that this is now part of investing. I'm basically, instead of going to depression and capitulation and panic, all of this stuff that's happening at the bottom there, I just go straight from euphoria straight to hope.
You got a lot of hopium. I think I pass by denial a little bit myself personally. I sort of pass by and think, like you said, oh, then maybe there'll be a double top. We've been investing for a while, so we've been around for a good number of these, even as far back as 2001. But I didn't really learn my lesson until probably this last time, 2020. Had I have learned my lesson, I would be done by now. I mean, honestly, the crash of 2008 was enough to have made us rich at this point. And so, like you, I'm not panicking as much in this bear market now because I realize that it's just going to push my realization of my goals a little further out. But I don't have any concern now that it's going to happen. It's just the time frame that's annoying, that I now have to wait longer.
We have a choice now. It's basically you have to be a pragmatist about it, I feel. You have a choice. Either you dollar cost average into things of quality that you believe in long term. While it's painful, doesn't matter. You dollar cost average. That's the whole point. Like, it's supposed to be painful to become rich. Okay. Otherwise, everyone would be rich. And we keep talking about this. That it's not supposed to be easy. And in 5 years, let's say when Ethereum or when Enphase or Tesla are, 4 or 5 times bigger, whatever they are, people are going to say like, oh, that was an easy bet for you guys. They're not going to realize all of the suffering that you have to go through to get to the other side.
They also don't realize what that macro and economic environment feels like on a daily basis to your monthly nut that you got to put together every month. How you're just throwing money into this thing that is down 70%. I mean,
a black void. It's a black void.
You just go, I'm not, and if it's been that way and you've been DCAing for months, I mean, you're DCAing and you're buying all these things and they just keep dipping and keep dipping and keep dipping. It's actually really hard. That is the hard part of investing. When he asks here, what pain do you want in your life? What are you willing to struggle for? I am willing to struggle and put myself through that and take my hard-earned money today and invest it into companies or crypto that I truly believe the thesis long-term, not knowing if it's going to work out in my time frame. That is really hard to do, especially when there's all these things that you could be doing with the money. It's really, really difficult. The other thing that I took away from this was he was talking about how happiness is related to solving problems. And a lot of the companies that I like are companies that are solving real problems. I think that companies that are solving a problem at the core of their business are just companies that are fundamentally set up for success better.
Yes, when I look at something like Tesla or Enphase, they're in markets that are on the upswing. Even when it's on the downswing, it's on the upswing, if that makes any sense.
The underlying problem that they're solving still needs to be solved and will be solved. Yes.
It's still, even if there's little dips, because nothing can go in a straight line up. That's impossible. So, but how is solar in my imagination that this is not a real thing? How are electric vehicles, which I see every day driving by my house, how are they part of my imagination that this is not taking over the world? How are the panels on my roof right now, which are producing free energy for me, part of my imagination that it's not happening? So when I look at the reality of things and then I look at the market, I'm like, well, the reality shows me what's actually happening. The market is just showing me something that it's confusing you. Oh, solar is not real, or it's overvalued, or it's in a bubble. Shout out to Chris Patel.
gotta do a little dig.
Right now, Tesla is down. They're confusing the actual company with the stock.
Right.
And we know that the company is doing massive things. They're planning supposedly a new factory. Like, if you're on the downswing, would you be planning a new factory? Imagine they announce a new factory in the next couple of months. Then what kind of company on the downswing is trying to grow its factory? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. What kind of company has so much cash left discussing doing a $10 billion buyback? You're not a failing company if you're buying back.
You're not a failing company. And if you're opening up a new factory anywhere, maybe in Mexico now, they're talking about, you're not a failing company. If you're producing, instead of 50% compounding growth, you're producing 40% compounding growth, you're not a failing company. So there's all these things that show the reality of the situation. And then there's the actual stock market, which right now is devaluing all of that because of the macro environment.
Yes, the pain will lead to tremendous positivity. In the long run, it's going to pay off. We talked about solar having 3% penetration right now. This is the definition of critical mass. Critical mass, when a new idea is being introduced to a group of people, even if many think the idea is good, they will be loath to adopt the idea until they are persuaded that others are moving. Then their rush is to adopt the idea. The effect is slow at start until a critical mass is reached, and then a runaway snowball effect takes place. For critical mass to be reached, this is important, you typically need between 5 and 25% of the population. The point where critical mass is achieved is often called the tipping point. We can safely say when solar penetration becomes somewhere around 5 or 7%, the runaway effect takes over, and the acceleration will be huge. Getting to that point is going to be really hard. But we've already reached 5% tipping point for mass adaptation of EVs. This was July of this year. The US is the latest country to pass the critical EV tipping point of 5% of car sales. To date, 19 countries have reached the 5% tipping point. Other car markets approaching the threshold include Canada, Australia, and Spain. EV sales grew 160% year over year in 2021 and are expected to grow exponentially in 2022. If the US continues its aggressive shift to EVs, approximately a quarter of the new sales could be EVs by 2025, beating forecasts by 2 years. And we discussed this because all the forecasts are usually linear versus exponential.
5%. I mean, how do EVs not get to 20%?
That's what I'm saying. And if that happens, what happens to the market cap? What happens to the multiples in terms of that Wall Street gives them, especially if they can prove, once you have enough data and you can actually start seeing the S curve. We're just really at this final, I think we're at this final point before the S curve really becomes visible in quarter over quarter, and you really start seeing these numbers.
We're at the point right now where people are debating on the Discord, on the internet, whether this is actually happening.
The viability, yes, I know. It's
That's
insane.
the point we're at, okay? And in 2, 3, 4 years, I think 2025 is probably a safe bet, 2026, that no one is going to be debating this the same way. That means
They're still going to be there, bro. They're still going to be there. They're still going to be there. These idiots are born every day. They're still going to be there. And there'll be the people that will still refuse to adopt it because they want to make a statement against Elon, or they want to, you know what I mean?
Straggler. There's always one straggler in the group.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, they have loud voices, and people feel like they're actually hurting Elon. Like I see this. I even see this in our Discord. People that say, "I'm not going to buy an EV. I'm not going to buy an EV because Elon Musk said something on Twitter." And I'm like,
Johnny Boy, we're calling you out, Johnny Boy.
I don't know if it was Johnny Boy. It might have been
Oin
in the Bay. Oin in the Bay.
I'm not buying this. Johnny Boy said, "I'm not buying a Tesla." But I said, okay, it doesn't make any sense. Wouldn't you invest in Enphase, no matter if Badri made a mistake or anything? He goes, no, I'm investing in Tesla.
Right. I just don't want to buy the car. If you have kids, would you really put your child in the second safest vehicle on the road? I mean, but the point is, it's going to scoop them up. They're going to get swept up in it. Like, I personally know, and I've been involved in 6 sales of Tesla purchases, including the 2 that I have, just from someone asking me about the vehicle, or someone asking me about it not knowing that I have one, or someone seeing it and riding in it and being like, whoa, this thing's like a spaceship. I didn't know that these cars were this nice. I'm already seeing the snowball runaway effect, and I'm one random fucking nobody in the middle of California. You're experiencing the same thing in Jersey, where we just are living in completely different environments, yet we're seeing the same thing.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I have 2 Teslas. You have 2 Teslas.
That's true.
Our common friends have 1 or 2 Teslas.
It's true.
Well, my point is, I've never known anybody to have 1 car of anything. I didn't look at all my friends and they all had Toyota Camrys. Maybe they did like around the world. I'm not saying that wasn't a successful car, but in my group of people, we never had 1 car.
Well, part of that is because Tesla only has a few models. So if you're going to buy one, you're probably going to buy, you're going to have some overlap. If you know more than 5 people, you're going to have some overlap.
No, but still, it's kind of weird. That's kind of a weird thing.
It is weird. It is weird because the last time I experienced that was in my early 20s when I was buying the big muscle cars, or like in my late 20s when I was all about the Jeeps. And like, my best friend would have a Jeep at the time, and that was part of our culture. It was car culture. This is what's strange. Car culture is usually built around the modification of your vehicle. Part of the time that you spend is making the car better. And to still have that sort of car culture with vehicles that you can't do anything to these Teslas minus cosmetics without voiding the warranty, yet it still brings these people together in a community.
Teslas are part of car culture in a different way. The fact that we all want to drive them and drive fast. Basically.
Speaking of driving fast, I will be dropping the video of when I took the Model X Plaid onto an autocross track. So be sure to hit like and subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when that video drops. I met a couple of Tesla owners there, and I have some videos of myself driving around in their cars. And there is a real growing community of these Tesla owners that are doing some modifications without voiding the warranty that help them get better performance, and they just enjoy driving these vehicles. And one of the guys that I met there told me about these Tesla only events that they're doing now. Whereas like now I see a lot of these events that are for Corvette owners only, or Porsches. They're the only ones that race. They're doing a lot of these events that are just for
Tesla to race them, they're going to lose.
Yeah. Well, the Teslas, yeah, dude. I mean, you'll see some of my times were incredibly impressive.
These guys are spending, thousands or tens of thousands to modify their cars to be super fast, and then you just drive in with a stock Plaid X, and
stock Plaid,
It's over.
Yeah, and you'll see in the video several of those owners. Listen, they were all really nice guys, and I got to say, I met some really cool people that day. Some of the owners of the other cars asked to come in and just go for a ride. They're like, I've never felt it before, and so you'll see the times. I did a run with a fully packed car. I had like 6 people or 5 people in the car, and did the run. It did about a second.
That's
Mostly in that it's a second, yes, but it was mostly because of the turning. The turning radius had to be wider with, like, you figure maybe an extra 1,000 pounds of weight. But every single one of them was just completely surprised at how well that car performed for being so large and being so heavy. And a lot of them were surprised at how, in general, how EVs perform.
You probably made a sale, you know. Eventually,
Absolutely. One of those guys.
A sale.
Yeah, one of those guys for sure.